Okay, so we all know that founder-led content is a very powerful distribution channel for your startup in 2024. No one is denying that. You understand its importance, but you might be wondering, how do I get this content to post from my founder's account? Or if you're a founder or CEO watching this, you're wondering, how do I have the time to produce all this content? I don't really want to. Content's not my thing. It's not really what I enjoy. And there's just other tasks within the business that I need to be spending my time on. I cannot justify the 10, 15, 20 hours a week it might take to write my own content. I'm not going to be one of those people that sits here and tells you, oh, the only way to create authentic content from your CEO's account is to have them write it themselves and using a team or a ghostwriter or an agency or whatever you want to call it. It's not authentic. It's cringe, this and that. I call BS on that. I want to walk you through today a system that is fairly automated and will only take your founder about 30 to 45 minutes every 2 weeks to provide the source material to be turned into tons and tons of content assets that will increase distribution, get in front of your ICP, and ultimately build trust and generate leads for your company. And this is the system we use with our clients internally at our agency. So I'll just give it to you. You can copy it, steal it for yourself. I don't care. And look, if a founder wants to create their own content and they have sort of a knack for it, or it's a natural talent of theirs, they like being on camera, they like writing content for LinkedIn or Twitter, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. Obviously, that is quite an advantage. But for most of the founders that I talk to, they just either don't want to do that, they want to be behind the scenes, or they don't have the time. So how do we get content out of their head and into a format that their team, whether it be an in-house marketing team, an agency, or a freelancer, can turn into compelling, authentic social media content for their personal brand? And there's a 3-phase system. This is exactly what we use for our agency. I'll run you through it, bookmark this, save it, whatever. All I ask is that you like this video. Helps the algorithm. I'd appreciate it. So at a high level, what we're doing here is we're conducting a content interview every 2 weeks with the founder, CEO, whoever that figurehead for your company is going to be on social media. And we're just going to run them through a series of prompts and get them to open up and rant and tell stories and give takes that can then turn into the content for LinkedIn and Twitter. So that's the super TLDR version. There's 3 phases to this process. The first part before we get into phase 1 is just get the time on the calendar. This is the most important part and often what is the bottleneck for this actually happening and being executed in your marketing org. A lot of CEOs don't understand the importance of content. If they're truly too far gone, I don't know what to tell you. At this point, most CEOs know that content is at least somewhat important. So just get the 30 minutes or 45 minutes on their calendar every 2 weeks and make it a recurring ritual. And if you need to convince them of like why it's important, I have a video on my channel that'll help you do that. So I'll link that above. First step or the first phase in this process is to list out the prompts or questions that you're going to run them through. The way these content interviews are conducted is pretty much like a podcast that doesn't get published. So just list out a list of, say, 5 to 7 questions. Typically, when I'm prepping for a content interview with a client, I'll list out 7 questions. Each individual question should correlate to a post idea that you have. So an example of this would be if you want to write a post about 5 myths about email marketing. So say you're writing for the founder of an email marketing SaaS company. You would ask in the content interview, what are some myths about email marketing that drive you insane? Or what are some myths about email marketing that you think just need to die? Ask a question that will lead to that desired response that can turn into that post that you had in your mind. So when you plan out your prompts, start with the end product in mind. So if you know you want to create a listicle post about 5 myths about email marketing, do that. If you want to make a post about the founding story of the company, you might just have a prompt that's like, tell me about the founding story of XYZ company, or tell me how you met your co-founder, or something like that. So think about the post that you want, reverse engineer a prompt for that, and that'll be your content prompts. Do about 5 to 7 of those. When you're ramping up, maybe start with less. So 3 or 5, just get into the habit of having those. And those are like the overall themes that you're going to go through. What I would recommend for this as well, another pro tip, is to keep these questions organized around a theme. So an example of this could be, I know we just came out of December, it's January at this point, but in December, like these predictions posts do really well on LinkedIn and X for B2B companies. So you could have asked or made the content interview centered around predictions for the upcoming year, or how they see the industry evolving, or just stuff like that. Another consideration when you're planning out your prompts is think in terms of top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel content. I ran through this at a deeper level in the previous video that I did on the personal branding system for founders. The TLDR for the system is top of funnel topics and content are meant to get a lot of visibility, distribution. They're sort of broader content pieces that don't speak specifically to your ICP, but are engineered to get tons of engagement. This would be like just general startup or business advice, or just hot takes, stuff like that. Middle of funnel is more industry specific. So using the email marketing SaaS example, that would be content about email marketing or D2C or more industry specific that your ICP will find relevant, but it's still value oriented. It's not a sales pitch. It's just value oriented. So it will still build an audience. And bottom of funnel content is very product heavy. These are more of your feature announcements, case studies, stuff that's meant to convert that audience that you already built into an email subscriber or a demo booked or something like that. So when you're planning out those prompts, start with the end in mind with your post. So say you have a post idea in mind and you want to split it up into, say, if you have 7 thought starters, you would do like 2 top of funnel prompts, 3 middle of funnel prompts, and then 2 bottom of funnel prompts. And you can work backwards from that. So say you want to write a top of funnel post to generate a lot of visibility on LinkedIn. So what would something like that be? That would be something like using the founder story as an example, writing a post about how the 2 co-founders met, specifically if they have like a particularly fascinating story, writing a story about that. So if you want to write a top of funnel post about that experience that would gain a lot of visibility on the platform, what's a question that you could ask that would lead to source material for that post? You see how that works? And then on a similar note, for bottom of funnel content, if you want to write a post about a few customer stories, you could just have the prompt of telling about 2 or 3 customer stories that really stood out to you over the past 2 weeks. So you're collecting that source material that then turns into that finished product. So you start with that finished product in mind. I know we're spending a lot of time here, but I want to make sure this gets impressed into your mind because it's very important to understand at a deep level. The main takeaway is you want the content funnel from when you source that content to the finished product to be very cohesive. You don't want to just collect random information here, random information there, and have to like piece it together. It gets so much easier to build out a cohesive strategy when everything is built out with that end post in mind that you want to create. Now, as far as organizing this, you can do whatever you want. There's no magic formula here. What I like to do is have a page in Notion and then just a simple Notion table. I'm not a huge like automations or super fancy Notion guy. Just have a very simple bare bones table where I just list out the prompts, separate them based on whether they're in progress, we recorded them, or we need to revisit them, just so I can tell if we already used them. And then I also have them labeled by top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Super straightforward. One learning here is I like having one running doc versus several different documents for each call. What I would do before was have like a separate document for every content interview, and I would send a new document to the client every single time. This doesn't work that well because you end up with just a super fragmented process, and you might have a prompt from 3 weeks ago that was really compelling that now you're not using anymore because it's buried in this archive of past content interview prompts. Just keep one running list. That way you can revisit the good ones. And also, if you run out of time on a content interview and you don't get to one that was compelling and could have turned into something very good for content, you can come back to it next time. Okay, so now you have the prompts laid out. Let's go into phase 2, which is actually conducting the interview. Just hop on a Zoom call or a Google Meet. And what we do is we use a transcription tool. So we use Firefly's AI. I love it. It works great. I haven't tried the other tools, so I can't really speak to those. We're not sponsored by Fireflies. It was just the first one that I stumbled upon and it works well. So I'd recommend it, but use one of those transcription tools. And then you're just going to run the founder through those prompts and just let them rant. That's really all there is to it on the interview. The only piece of advice I would give here is if you land on a question that leads to a response that is especially compelling, don't rush to the next prompt. It's like an interview. If you find something that's good, dig deeper. That's how you end up with really high quality, authentic content that performs well. As far as the structure for this, I would allot 30 minutes, maybe 45, depending on how often you can make these happen. If it's every 2 weeks, 30 minutes should be sufficient. If you're only able to do it monthly, maybe go for 45 or even an hour, but you should be able to get plenty of material in 30 minutes. And a quick pro tip here, if you have the ability to turn the content interview into a video clip, so like a talking head video like this, if the founder has a decent mic setup or camera and they actually are pretty good on camera, consider doing that. It's not a must. You don't have to do it, but this is something that can help you extend that shelf life of the content even more and lean into video content a bit without having to do a full production or get into short form content. So worth considering. Now that's phase 2, pretty simple. The biggest thing there is just going to be getting better at running the interview. So if you have experience running a podcast before, or if you've done sort of interviews like that before, this is going to be way easier for you. If you're newer to that, then it might take a few reps to get good at asking those follow-up questions and knowing when to dig deeper and really pulling on the emotions from the founder and getting them to open up a bit. Because sometimes what you'll find is you'll get onto a call and they're pretty closed off. Maybe they're having a busy day. They're just kind of tired. they're not really one to talk that much. So you might need to get better at just digging deeper. And that just comes with reps. So don't be super hard on yourself if you have an interview where you don't get a ton of material to work with. It's just going to take some practice. Okay, cool. So that's phase 2. Let's go to phase 3. Before we do that, if you're liking this video, drop a like down below. It helps with the algorithm. We're new here on YouTube. I'd really appreciate it. And if you are new around here, drop a sub. I'm posting stuff like this at least once a week. So if you want to grow a social media presence that generates leads, you're in the right place. Phase 3, the final phase, is turning that source material into content for LinkedIn or for X. And this is the hardest part and the part that requires the most actual technical expertise. So the first part here that I would recommend is if you're the one responsible for repurposing this content interview, watch through it once without having to write a post. So just watch through the interview or read through the transcript, just give it a once over and make notes around anything that you find interesting or that might turn into a good hook for social media, like any one-liners that are particularly attention grabbing, any stories the founder tells that stand out, any hot takes that you think could turn into compelling content for LinkedIn or for Twitter. This is before you write a word. Just go through and note down the timestamps of these bits and pieces that you think could turn into compelling content. And then once you do that, you can go in and actually draft the content. The simplest way to do this is remember how at the beginning I was telling you, you want to formulate the question so that the response can lead to a post. The simplest and most straightforward way to repurpose this content from the source material into social media content is just to go through and copy paste the transcript verbatim into, say, a Notion doc or a Google Doc, and just reformat that transcript of the answer of that question into a piece of content that's just formatted for LinkedIn or for Twitter, whether it's a text-based post or a thread or a carousel, whatever it may be. You're going to have to clean up the transcript a little bit. It's not always going to be super clean. There might be filler words or just things that don't quite make sense grammatically that you're going to have to clean up, but you can copy paste most of that one answer into a post that corresponds with one topic. The problem is most content teams or agencies stop there, when in reality, there are a million different ways that you can take this one piece of source material and make it into compelling content. So a lot of teams will just only use this super straightforward way of just copy pasting. But just to give an example, say you have a post about those 5 email marketing myths, the one that I mentioned earlier, a post about 5 email marketing myths that drive you insane. Yeah, that listicle of 5 myths can turn into a post, and it should, but each one of those myths can turn into another post. Or maybe there's a way that something was phrased that inspires a hook for a totally different post that's not even pulled directly from that source material, but the source material gave you the inspiration to then go write that post. Or another way you could do it is, say you have these 5 myths that drive you insane. You could inverse that and turn that into 5 best practices. So kind of the opposite of those 5 myths. Get creative with how you use this source material. Don't just keep it super basic and copy paste, especially if you have a deep understanding of the product. And once you do enough of these content interviews, you can get to know the founder at a deep level to understand their takes and opinions on certain things. So you can then take little bits of a hook or little bits of a post that you find in a content interview transcript and then expand on those into a whole separate post. So like an example of this would be maybe in one of the rants on a topic, a founder mentions a brief story, but doesn't dive too deep into it, but it's compelling enough that you're like, hey, this would actually make a good post. But you have that little kernel of information, but not enough to develop it into a complete different post. Now that example, you might not be able to take and just expand on your own because you don't have the story context, but you could go ask the founder hey, you mentioned this. I think this would make a strong post. What's some other context here that I would need? Or it could be a topic for the follow-up content interview. But you can use this source material as building blocks just to create this endless stream of content ideas. And then once you have those topics and core pieces, you want to make them into formats that are performing well on the platform right now. So this is where keeping up with trends and keeping up with what's working at the moment is really important. Maybe if I have a listicle of the 5 myths about email marketing, the post I've been referring to a few times throughout this video, maybe instead of formatting that as a text-only post, I would take that and make it into a carousel on LinkedIn, because I know carousels are getting rewarded quite a bit right now. Or maybe I would take that on Twitter or X and make it into a thread versus a long form text only post. Both of those can be fine, but I actually am seeing threads perform quite well right now. They're kind of back, so maybe I lean more into that. And there's just so many different ways that you can remix stuff. But once you have that source material and the overall idea for the post, you can take that and make it into a format that is getting rewarded on the social platforms. And with this technique in particular, you don't need to worry about repeating yourself. That's a whole topic in and of itself, but so many marketing teams overblow this concern. It's just not a concern at all. Your audience is not going to see enough of your content to get sick of your content. If they are seeing enough of your content to get sick of your content, that's a good problem to have, because a lot of your followers, a lot of your audience isn't going to see every single piece of social content that goes out from your brand. So that concern that, oh my God, what if they think I'm posting too much? They're not going to see all of it. And if they do, that's a pretty good indicator that they're engaging with your content. So they're getting served more of it. So they're a fan of yours. Overall, that's the system. You engineer the prompts, you run the content interview, and then you extract the best parts of that content interview and format them into content types that are performing well on these social platforms at the moment. And what this does is it allows you to have this endless stream of content coming from your founder's account that is truly authentic to their points of view. Because a lot of ghostwritten content, or just content that isn't produced or written directly by the founder, is very generic and turns into copy-pasted Wikipedia pages that we're all sick of at this point and people can see right through. That happens because the founder isn't involved in the production process at all. And that usually happens because they don't have the time, or maybe they don't have the desire. And I get it. Like I said, as a founder myself, I truly do understand. But this system allows you to create tons of content that is truly authentic and high quality, because you're getting like expert opinions directly from the founder, who ideally has credibility and expertise in whatever niche you're trying to build an audience around. If not, that's a whole different problem. But this allows you to get that high quality content without requiring 10, 15, 20 plus hours per week or per month of your founder's time. So feel free to use this for yourself. I'd recommend it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. And if this was helpful, drop a like and a comment, and let me know what other questions you have about B2B content strategy. I'll be building out a full library of stuff here on YouTube, and I'll drop another video up on screen right now for you to check out to learn even more about how to build a full personal branding system as a B2B founder. So I'll see you over there.